us.
Hello.
So Jim, I think we might be at a place where we'll start, and then as others come in, we'll welcome them into the conversation. And like I said, this is going to be really informal, and we're going to go through. We're going to primarily work from the website, which is where all the block by block information is contained. So I'm going to share my screen. And as I said, if you have questions about this, feel free to ask. We also have some of our neighborhood engagement team members on here. We have Del Kuhlman, who works with some of you. We also have our Ray Ortiz, who is our newest team member, who we're excited to have part. And so he's going to be learning about this as well. We've got Nikki Southall, and we also have Kim Pierce on board with us as well. And so we are here to provide some background assistance, and we'll be checking the chat. And so some of my team members will be responding if there are questions in the chat, and we'll bring that to my attention if there's some things that I need to answer. So with that being shared, with that being stated, if you give me a minute, I am going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so today's session is about the Block by Block Neighborhood Pride Grant. And this is a really good opportunity for communities to really take advantage of some resources so that you can advance some type of project or initiative that you've been working on. And it's a grant that we've been working with for a number of years. We have several applications that are in the process of being played out. We've also have a few that are in queue and they're waiting for their approval. And on the 15th of February, which is next week, we're going to be opening up that next round. So this is a great time for you to come in and get information about the grant and ask questions. So if you go to the website, it's really easy to access. It is through the Department of Neighborhood Development's website. And you can locate this by going to the neighborhood engagement page, and then over to the left, you can click on the option on the drop-down menu, and it will bring you, there is an option for the block by block grants. And if you click that, that'll bring you to this page. And Jim has a full whole list of information for you to give you information about the grant. So as I shared, this grant is really about you working with others in your community on projects and ideas that are about enhancing the quality of life for your specific neighborhood. There are two grants that we offer. The first is the matching grant, and this is a grant of up to $2,500. Now, when we say matching, that means that for each dollar that we give you, you have to match it either with another dollar, in-kind services, or volunteer hours. Now, it can't be, thank you, Jim, it can't just be volunteer hours. So there has to be some other contribution. When we say in-kind services, what we're saying is, just for an example, let's just say you want to do a community gardening project. Your in-kind support could be that a local nursery is going to donate $1,000 worth of plants and soil for you to use. So that would be an appropriate match. So again, we're looking for something that shows a good mix from the neighborhood of both funds, in-kind contributions, as well as volunteer time. And there's actually an actual number, a dollar amount that you can attribute to volunteer hours, and we'll take a look at that on the actual application. Now, maybe you don't need $2,500. Maybe you're looking to do something on a smaller scale. Maybe you just want to do newsletters, or maybe you want to do door hangers for the community, or you want to do signs that promote when you're going to have your next Civic League meeting. Then a mini grant might be a better fit for you. And with this one, this is a grant that gives you up to $500 that you can use. And there is no match required for this grant. It's also a shorter application. And again, we're going to take a look at that. So below is the grant by grant application. And we're going to go through and look at those applications. But before we do, I just want us to go through and take a look at some other things that are on the website. So along with the application, this is the full packet. If you are interested and you are familiar with this because you've already applied for a grant before, then you may not need to go through and look at the entire package. You may just decide, I'm just going to click on the mini form and fill that out, which is a fillable PDF so that you can type it and send it in. And then there is the matching grant, which is also a fillable PDF that you can type on and send in to us. Regardless of which application you use, you will need to submit a W-9 form. There's a blank copy of that. Some Civic leagues already have that because they have accounts, they have banking accounts set up. And so you will need to submit your W-9, and you will also need to submit verification that you are either a state entity, a state non-stock entity, or you have 501c3 or 501c4 status. Most Civic leagues do not have 501c3 or 501c4. It is a process, and it does come at a considerable cost. You don't have to do that. Just having the state non-stock entity status is sufficient, and that only costs $75 to start and then $25 to renew each year. As you can see, the application, hello, Mr. Brenner. The application deadline for the next round of grants is March 1st. We're going to open it up on February 15th. You will have until March 1st to submit your application by 5 p.m. In terms of eligibility, you have to be a Norfolk entity. Okay, so we typically we have civic leagues that apply for the grant. Sometimes we will have other nonprofits that apply for the grant. That is fine. If you are a nonprofit and you want to apply for a grant, you will have to partner with the civic league in which the activity is going to take place. So it still has to get the civic league's approval before that grant application can move forward. And also, if you are a civic league, you have to be an active civic league. So you have to be able to show that you have open membership, that you have officers, bylaws, and that you are having regular minutes and have meeting minutes for those meetings. And as I shared, you have to be a legal entity. Any questions about anything that's on the website before we take a look at the actual application? And my screen is a little small, so I can't see everything. Do we have any questions, Jim, in the chat? Or does anyone have their hand raised?
I don't see any questions, either raised hands or in the chat room.
Okay, so I'm going to assume that we're good to go, and I'm going to go up and we're going to take a look at the actual application packet. Bear with us as it opens. Okay, so this is the application. I am going to make this just a little bit bigger. Can everybody see that? Are we good to go with viewability? I see Ms. Dozier nodding her head, so I'm going to assume that we are good to go, as is Ray. So we're going to scroll through. I talked about what the block by block grant is. And again, it really is about communities being able to take advantage of the resources that have been set aside so that you can engage in some type of project or activity that is for the betterment of the community. It could be a physical project. It could be something social. I know we recently had an event this past Saturday for civic leaders, and there was a question about using it for the book club. And so that is certainly something that can be considered as a potential project that could use the block by block funds. And as it states in the packet, this really is about collaboration. So the grant should not be done in a silo. So it shouldn't just be the Civic League president says, well, you know what, I want to do this, and I am going to apply for this application on behalf of the Civic League, and there's no other participation from other board members or others in your neighborhood. This really is about sitting down with other people and talking about what is something that's going to be beneficial to us. What is there something that we've been working on that we think is really going to highlight the assets of our neighborhood? Is this something that's going to increase our membership? Is this a way for us to engage people throughout our community? When you're working on your grant application, please give that some thought as to who needs to be at the table when you decide that you want to apply for this application. But this is not intended to be a solo person effort. As I shared earlier, there are 2 grants that you can apply for: the mini, which is up to $500, and the matching, which is $2,500. You don't have to apply for the entire $2,500, but that is the max amount that you can receive. It talks a little bit about the residents' roles, and this is really important. As I said earlier, we want you to help promote this program. And so you may not have an idea about how to use this, but someone else in your neighborhood may. And so in the spirit of neighbors building neighborhoods, we want to make sure that this is something that, again, is a collaborative effort. This is also a really good time for you to work with your neighborhood development specialist. That's what he or she is there for, to help walk you through the application and to suggest to you some things to include so that it minimizes the likelihood of your application being returned back to you, because there were either sections where information was missing, or there was incomplete information, or your figures didn't come out correct, or you forgot to get signatures. So all of those types of things will cause the application to be returned to you for edits, or could cause your application to be denied. And so we want to minimize the possibility of that happening. So one of the things that we strongly encourage you to do is, before you submit the application to me, is to work with your neighborhood development specialist, or in the case of Nikki and Jim, your neighborhood liaison, so that they can review the application with you and make sure that it's filled out completely and accurately. And then we'd also like for you, on the back end of this, when this whole COVID thing is something that is not, oh, give me a second. If I don't log into the VPN, it's going to kick me out. And we don't want that to happen in the middle of our presentation. The other thing that we would really like for you to do on the back end of this is, once you've gone through the process and you've received your grant funds, you've completed your project or initiative, is to take lots of pictures, because we like to highlight those things. We love to promote the things that are happening in Norfolk's neighborhoods. And so either through our annual expo or on our website, we really would like to use that as an example to another neighborhood that's considering applying for the grant. We like to be able to show to them, these are how other neighborhoods have successfully used these funds. In terms of what we as the city will do, is we're there to support you, and we're there to promote the program. So from time to time, you will get emails from your neighborhood liaison saying, hey, the grant application process is open, please apply. We will work with you on completing the application, provide that technical assistance. We maintain the records for this. We facilitate the process of the grant. So once you give it, the final copy comes to me. I work within the department to get that set up. And then as it goes through a couple of other departments, like our legal department and our finance department, we make sure that we're working with those other departments to get the agreement established, and then get you the actual check with your funds. And so we will be working with you, and we'll be working with our internal partners to make sure that all of this is accomplished. And any questions? Are we good to go? All right. So remember, you can feel free to give us the thumbs up or raise your hand if you have any questions as we go along. So as I share, the next application process is going to open up on February 15th, and then it's going to close on March 1st at 5 p.m. Any applications received after that will not be reviewed. You will have to wait until the next round of application comes up, which will not be until the start of the next fiscal year. So this is really important for me to stress this to you. If there is a project that you're looking to do this summer, okay, or early fall, now is the time to apply. So the next round of applications is going to be in February, and that's going to run until March 1st. And then we're going to be closing out our fiscal year in June. And so if you are thinking about having an event in July or August, you don't want to wait until July when the applications open up again, because that's not enough time. This is a process. It's a process to make sure that we go through and we work with all the applicants to ensure that their applications are ready and good to go. And then it is a process to move it. And I will answer that in a minute, Sherry. It is a process to move the application through, because it has to go through several departments. And so as it says in the document, it expect up to 3 months for the application to be processed. So as you're planning for your event, give some time, give some thought as to when do we want to have the event and when do we need to start applying. Hey, Philip, good to see you. To answer Sherry's question in the chat, and I can't see it, it popped off. Could you read that question for me, Jim?
Sure. If a Civic League got a $500 mini grant, when are you allowed to apply again?
That's a good question, Sherry. So I want to give you 2 parts to that question. It's a 2-part question. You can apply for a mini and a matching at the same time. And this is a question that's come up if you are doing 2 separate projects. So you can apply, and there, and I'll use Ingleside. Ingleside took advantage of this a couple of years back when they did a mini and a matching, because they had 2 different events that were going on and 2 different initiatives. And so you can apply for a mini and a matching grant at the same time, as long as they're for 2 different efforts. If you apply for a mini grant this year, you can apply next year as long as there's enough funds. Like if we let's just say, Sherry, you applied and you got the grant this year, and then next year there were, the next cycle rather, there were 15 applicants, and of that 15, we had 5 that had previously applied. Well, the funds are going to go first to those that have not yet received the funding. So depending on how much funding we have and how many applicants we get will determine if we're able to fund that grant for the subsequent funding cycle. Does that make sense? And I can't see you, but so either put something in the chat, yes, or let me know. All right, thank you, ma'am. Okay, so moving along to the program guidelines, and we talked a little bit about this earlier in terms of who can apply. Typically, it's just our civic leagues apply, but there have been occasions where we've had nonprofits to apply. And again, if you are a nonprofit or some kind of neighbor or some kind of other civic association, you will have to partner with the civic league in the neighborhood in which you plan to implement your project. So you will have to get their support, that civic league's support. The civic league will still have to sign off on that application. And again, we're going to take a look at that as we continue to scroll. For civic leagues, you have to be an active civic league. And so that's what we're going to check. Is this an active civic league? Do they have a president and members? Do they have bylaws? We do need a copy of that if we don't already have one on file. Do they have regular meetings? And as I shared earlier, we will need a W-9 and proof of your non-stock or your nonprofit status. And if you're having trouble getting this information, then that again is a good time for you to work with your neighborhood development specialist so that you can get all that squared away before you submit your application. Here are a couple of examples of some ways that you can use the block by block grant. And we've seen a lot of these happen with community gardens, neighborhood gateways. And so again, if you're trying to do some type of beautification as people come into your neighborhood, maybe you want to do something at the median, or you want to do something at the verge, there are some things that you can look at, and you can sometimes some projects do require you to work with city departments, and we'll cover that a little bit later, but we're open to that as well. Perhaps you want to do something at a community park. There have been civic leagues that have used the grant for a bark park, and so please give that some thought. Sherry, you might need to mute yourself. And
sorry.
then that's okay. The next one is if you maybe want to do some internal training for your neighborhood. And so it doesn't just have to be for beautification projects or things that are like physical labor or things that are about the physical change to the environment. Maybe you want to do something for youth. Maybe you want to have an event that's for the seniors, or you want to kind of bring in some type of skill building. So that's a possibility as well. As you can see, you can do a career day, or if you want to do a career fair. I don't know if we're doing that right now with COVID, but there may be some things where you want to do some type of virtual training. And so that is something that you can give some thought to as well. So that would be a use that would fall under the guidelines. Maybe you want to, there's a virtual neighborhood conference and you want to pay for members of the Civic League and people from the community to participate in that. Again, that's something that could be considered as well. In terms of environmental enhancements, here's a way for you to do rain gardens, or you may want to partner and do something with Justin Schaefer with wetlands. Maybe you want to take this grant and couple it with a grant that you received from other entity and maximize your resources. And so that's something that we strongly encourage people to do as well. Some other things to consider, National Night Out, a back to school event. Maybe you want to partner with the PTA and do a back to school event for youth, which at some point, yay, they're going back to school. Maybe you want to look at doing an art exhibit or a block party. So once again, the COVID veil is lifted and we can all start to socialize, you might want to say, hey, let's come together and find a fun way for us to gather in the community park and do something. And then this is something that I would love to see communities do. Well, pre-COVID, it was something that I would suggest quite a bit to neighborhoods as a way for kids to have summer jobs, is to do a tool shed where maybe the Civic League decides we want to buy some lawn equipment and we will have youth to cut the lawns, and maybe some of our seniors are not able to do that. So there are just so many things. This is not an exhaustive list. So you may have ideas about doing something that we don't highlight on this application. If you are uncertain as to whether this would be an approved activity, please work with your neighborhood development specialist. You can also give us a call. You can also give me a call and we'll be happy to work with you on your idea. So you've decided, okay, I want to apply for the grant. Here are some of the project requirements. This is about involvement. And as you notice on here, we're saying involvement in all phases. So it is not just, okay, we're going to bring people together to plan for this, and then you all go about your business and I'm going to run everything from here on out. This really is about teamwork from start to finish. You want to make sure that this meets all city codes. And so there are some things that are going to be procedural. If you decide that you want to erect some type of structure, that may be something where you're going to have to work with the planning department to make sure that falls within guidelines. Or maybe you want to do something at a city park. You will have to work with recreation parks and open space before submitting your application to make sure it gets their approval. Let's say that we were not in the midst of a pandemic and you decide to do a cookout at a city park. You would still have to work with special events, or if you decide to do something and you need to close down a street because you want to do a block party, you would have to work with special events and go through the process of getting all your permits. All of those things have to be done before you can submit the application, because we can't fund you for something in which you don't have all your permits in order. So we have to be on the right side of city policy, guidelines, and regulations as well. And so you want to make sure that all those things are taken care of.
Anicia?
Yes, sir.
On that subject, my memory could be mistaken, but I think we've had problems in the past with the chicken and the egg problem, where a neighborhood wants to do something, but they can't do the event without the money, but they can't get the permit. They don't want to commit to the permit without having the money in hand, and they can't get the grant without having the permit. And so I think what you mentioned earlier about working with the neighborhood development specialist, and I think working with special events, that you can kind of make sure work with special events to get something in writing that can hopefully get you around that kind of circle problem.
Thank you for that, Jim. And you're right. There, when it comes to the permitting, that is not an easy process. And so, and we certainly understand the challenges that civic leagues may face when you're trying to work through your permits, and there's a cost for that. And the city funds can't go to pay for city services. And so that is, in that case, I always tell people the funds that you would have put towards something else, you may have to do it just kind of a shifting around of how you prioritizing or how you're allocating your funds for certain aspects of your project. And so the funds that we provide can go towards costs associated with that, but you would not be able to like pay special events with the funds that you receive from the city. And so again, we will work through that process. We will work through that process with you. And Jim, was there a comment that came up as related to permits?
Yes, Sherry had a question. I have had an issue and I'm still trying to get approval for a project in the right of way of a paper street. Any suggestions?
Is it for a block by block grant, or this is just unrelated paper street?
I had tried to do a block by block grant a couple of years ago to get try to do like a meditation garden. And when I started filling out the paperwork, I got to the point where they wanted to have the permit before I went farther in the project. And I never could get to a certain person to find out about the permit. And so now I've gotten approval for a dogway station for that same area. And I'm at that same person again, trying to get approval for a permit to put the dogway station in.
So let us help you with that, Sherry. If you are, and it sounds like you've really been working towards getting this particular initiative addressed. And so if you find that you just coming up against a brick wall on implementing your project, please work with us. Let us know so that we can sometimes do some things internally for you to help advance that particular initiative, or we can tell you where something may need to be addressed on your end to advance it. And so, in generally speaking, I can say we can work with you, but again, it also depends on the particulars of the project. But generally speaking, if you're having issues as it relates to permits, or there's something that needs to be taken care of with right of way, especially if you're talking about something with streets, then we certainly want to work with you to help you get past that hurdle as best we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the application requirement.
Alicia,
Yes, sir.
sorry to interrupt again. I think one of the tentative conclusions we've also reached after 10 years of doing this is that it's sometimes easier for like doing an event to look for private property, a church or somewhere to do it first, if at all possible. If you're having problems getting special events or don't want to pay those fees, largely because of the city's liability issues. So anytime there's an event on public property, the city is very concerned about risk management, and for good reasons, because we get sued a lot. And so, our general approach in doing this and helping neighborhoods is to look for a piece of private property first, if at all possible. Just a little hint.
Thank you, Jim. So yes, Jim has just offered you a nugget of good information. And so yes, a lot of times it will be a lot easier for you to work with a private entity on private property, sometimes working with a church or some other community organization. And again, that's something that we talk about in here, is find ways to partner with businesses and other entities in your neighborhood. And all the times that can also go towards your in-kind service. And so if you're doing a matching grant, for you to partner with them, and if they said, if there may be would have been a fee for that particular service that they offered to you, Like maybe if they're working with somebody else, they would have charged to use that space and they're giving it to you. You can use that as an in-kind service and include that on your application. And that would actually help you in terms of when we are looking to evaluate the matching grant application. So thank you for that, Jim. As we're talking about the application requirements, you want to make sure that you are working with your neighborhood development specialist, that you clearly explain what it is that you're trying to do. And again, we're going to cover a little bit. We're going to go into some of those things and some of the things that Jim talked about. I'll touch on that as we are actually looking at the application. So you want to make sure that you know all of your costs as it relates to the application. You understand and you demonstrate how this is going to be a community benefit. It's going to be a completed application and that you submit it at least 3 months in advance. If your application is in March and you submit it in February, then we're going to send it back to you because it's going to be unfeasible for us to get it back to you in time for you to have your particular event. For the selection process, all applications will be reviewed, okay? So any of those that require edits will be given a consultation. Something that we're going to do a little bit different moving forward with this is, in the past, when there were edits that were done to the application, I would work with the neighborhood development specialist, and then they would do the work through the application with you. Moving forward, what we're going to do is, if they're answering your application, I will follow up with you and schedule a time so that we can have a virtual meeting, and you, the neighborhood development specialist, and I will sit down and go through the application together. So you hear it directly from me, and we walk through what changes need to be made to the application. And I will send that I will scan and send that edited application to you as well. So you'll see all of my edits. The other thing is that you'll have 5 business days after the time that I send that application back to you in which to make all the edits and get it back to us. The reason why we're doing it this way is because we want to minimize the number of times that we're going back and forth with edits to the application. And the other reason for that is because when we're doing the applications, we're sending multiple applications in together, and we don't want other applications to be held up because we're having to go back and forth getting certain edits made or certain other supplemental documents obtained so that we can move forward. And so we want to streamline that process for you so that everybody's applications can get bundled together and then sent through the rest of the process. In terms of the evaluation criteria, we are looking at the level of resident involvement. Remember, early on, I said this is not a one-person activity. We're going to be looking at what is the benefit to the community as a whole. So how significant is the benefit? To what extent are your objectives feasible? Like, is this a realistic project? Does it make sense? Does it seem to be well thought out? We're looking at how did you collaborate with others? Did you try to collaborate with other businesses or organizations? And did you collaborate with other neighborhoods? That's something that we would really love to see, as neighborhoods collaborate together. And maybe you all apply for a matching grant that all ends up being a part of an overall project, and you just take on different aspects of that. So give that some thought as well. We would love to see multiple neighborhoods come together and collaborate on a project. Some things we want you to remember is neighborhood involvement. Can't stress that enough, that this is a collaborative effort. This is a team project, that you making sure that we work through the permitting process. And if you're going to have it in public spaces, to make sure that you have your insurance and approvals taken care of. Checking with Public Works if it's on right away, with planning our 7 venues, if this is going to be something that is going to have some permitting. Even before you dig, don't go down too far. Make sure that you call Miss Utility first. And then if you have questions, reaching out to us. And above all, let your neighborhood development specialist put eyes on that application before you hit send, and send it to the Neighborhood Engage email account. Any questions before we take a look, before we move into move into the frequently asked questions? Did a question just come up, Jim?
I don't see a question. Mr. Brenner, no, just checking, just made a comment that this is, bringing communities together is definitely something that hits his heart and soul.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Brenner.
you get a thumbs up on that one, Mr. Brenner. We think that this is a good work as well. So the frequently asked questions, we pretty much covered that in the previous discussion and things that I've shared. Again, talks about the two types of grants, who can apply. We talked about some of the ways that you can use the grant, either for beautification, maybe some skills training, environmental, maybe you want to do some events. It's still possible to do events, some socially distanced events. So don't just dismiss that all right out, because there's still a way that you can do that. We've seen that in Lake Whitehurst, I think in Ghent, they had a socially distanced event. So those are still possible for you to have. Be creative and think about some really cool ways that you can take advantage of this grant. We talked about the selection process. You can get the application online, which is where we are now. Your neighborhood development specialist can also send you a copy of the application. I can send you a copy of the application as well, but usually the easiest way is just to go to the website and download a copy. When you are ready to submit it, typically people will send it by email. We're not in the office right now. I do go in and check the mail from time to time, but the easiest way right now is to email your application. Jim did set it up as a fillable PDF. The only thing is that you would need to be able to send in a signed signature form. And again, we're going to take a look at that on the application. Okay. So this is just information about becoming a vendor, because if you are selected for a block by block application, and if you've not received payment from the city before, you will have to be set up as a vendor. And there is a process on here that we walk you through, but we are also available to assist you with setting that up online. And again, these are the walkthrough steps on how to do that. So here's the application. I'm going to scroll past the mini application only because it's very similar to the matching application, except for it's shorter, but the matching application kind of goes into more detail. So I think by talking about the matching application, we'll also cover what you would see in the mini application. So this is what the application looks like. The first thing it asks you is, what's the title of your project? And it could be, because I see Miss Dozier, I'm just going to use you. It could be the Bruce's Park Community Day. And maybe this is where they want to come together. They want to partner with the church. And so whatever you want to title it, that's where you would place it in this section. And then where it says name of organization, that's the name of the applicant, whoever is applying for the grant. So not your name, but the name of your civic league or the name of your nonprofit, the name of your business, whoever is applying for the grant, this is where your information would go. When it's asked you to describe your proposed project and what do you want to do and how do you intend to make this improvement, this is where you give details as to, and I'll come back to your question, Mr. Brenner. This is where you would talk about exactly what is it that you're looking to do. So if Bruce's Park wants to have a community day, what are you looking to do? You want to have an event that accomplishes what? Why do you want to have this event? What do you think is the benefit of this event? If it's a physical project where you want to do maybe a cleanup along the shoreline, how do you intend to make this improvement? Are you going to partner with the Elizabeth River Project? Are you going to partner with some other organization? So giving us details about what your project or your activity looks like, that's where this information would go. For the second question, it says, well, what issue will this project address? And so again, if you're talking about having a community day, that's probably going to be a neighborhood pride event. If you're talking about having a community cleanup, then that's going to go into landscaping and beautification. Maybe it's a mix of things. You could be having something where not only is it going to be a community pride event, but it's also community outreach, because maybe you're making people aware of the Civic League. You're giving out information about the Civic League at this event, or maybe you have a neighborhood watch program and you want to alert people about that. So a project could fall under more than one category, but it should at least meet one of the category descriptions that are listed below. And then which of the city's Norfolk's priorities does your project address? Most community projects are going to go into safe, healthy, and inclusive communities. Most of what you do will fall under that. But there are times when some of your projects are going to fit into other things. If you're doing a training program for seniors on how to how to access certain things on the internet, then that could be lifelong learning. And so it could fall under more than one category. Does someone have a question? Mr. Skiles, did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't.
Okay.
I'm
Just
sorry.
checking. No
Yeah.
problem. And so for your project location, you want to let us know where the activity is going to take place. And then we want to know, is this going to be on private property or city-owned property? And when we say the physical location, it would be very helpful if you give us, like, it's going to occur at, if it's a church, the name of that church, or if a street party is going to occur between the streets of 18th Street and 23rd Street, or if it's going to be on city property, we're going to have this activity at Barrard Park. So please be specific there. And if it is going to be on city-owned property, then that's where we're going to follow back up with you to say, hey, have you reached out to this department? Have these things been addressed? Did you get approval from planning? Did you get approval from public works? Did you get approval from recreation parks and open space? In terms of it being a neighborhood benefit, how is the community going to benefit from this project? So it's not just going to be, if you're doing the cookout, where we're going to get together and have a good time. It's going to be where we're looking to have residents to come together, interact with each other. We want people to know each other. We want to form stronger community bonds. We want to encourage people to be a part of our civic league. We are looking to have neighbors be connected to each other. We want to build on our community assets. So giving us a description of what it is that you want to do and being as descriptive as possible always helps. How many neighborhood residents were involved in the planning of this project? And maybe there were 6 residents that were involved in the planning. That was your planning committee. But when you look at the implementation, it could be where we're going to have 50 residents because we're going to be doing something over a number of days. Maybe you're going to have a back to school event. You're going to partner with the PTA. And then what tasks will they complete? And this is where you can be a little bit abbreviated. And the reason why I say that is because there's an entire other section where you're going to give those details. So here is, you don't have to give the breakdown of every task because there is a sheet. There is a section of the application where you will go through and you will break down those different tasks that are included. And that is part of the work plan, which we're going to scroll over and take a look at next. So when we talk about steps and activities, this is where you're going to outline that. So let's just say that you are going to do the block party. So maybe the first part of that activity is that you have to put together marketing. Maybe there's somebody that's going to be responsible for marketing the event. Maybe on another day, there's going to be somebody that's going to do the setup. Then you can have people that are going to facilitate the event. This person's going to run the bounce house. Other person's going to be responsible for the DJ. If this person's going to give out information, is going to pass out flyers or run the registration table. This person's going to be responsible for the food. Another person's going to be responsible for the giveaways. And then what happens post-event? Maybe there's someone that's going to be responsible for doing the breakdown and the cleanup. And then maybe you're doing a follow-up. So whatever activities or steps that are related to this project, this is where you want to include that. Who's responsible? You could say we're going to have 10 volunteers responsible for this. Or some people even say, well, this particular person is going to be responsible for this. Or maybe it's a partnership between you and the church. So Ms. Doja may say, well, Bruce's Park is going to be responsible for the actual event, but the church has volunteered to do the setup and the cleanup. So however you break that down. And then for the date completed, when do you expect to have those different steps completed, and about how much time? Now, if it's a 3-day event, then you may break it down by days. It's going to take 1 day to do this part. But if it's a 1-day event, it could be, well, it's only going to take us 30 minutes to do this, but it's going to take us 3 hours to do something else. So it just really depends on the setup of your event or your activity. And so the next question is your sustainability. Now, what I want to say here is that with the application, when you apply for the grant, what we want to know is if this is going to be an ongoing initiative, like let's just say that every year you want to do a membership drive. How do you plan to sustain this if this is going to come at a cost to you every year? So what do you, the answer is not, well, I'm going to apply for a block by block event grant to do this particular project, because one of the things that we make note of is that if you get a grant to do a membership drive this year, you cannot turn around and then apply for a grant to do a membership drive next year. You can apply for a grant to do a back to school event, but you can't apply for a block by block grant to sustain a particular project year after year. And so if this is something that you want to do, we like to know, how do you plan to sustain this? How do you plan to fund and support this project beyond this current year in which you receive those block by block funds? For the project narrative, this is where we want to get a breakdown of how do you plan to use the money. So again, we're going to use Bruce's part. This is where you would say, we're going to spend $200 for flyers. We are going to spend another $100 to rent a bounce house. We're going to use $200 so that we can get tables and chairs. We're going to use $50 so that we can buy take-home bags, or we can buy, you know, little streamers or whatever that is. So we want to see a breakdown of how you plan to spend them and how you plan to spend the money for this. And the reason why we're asking you these things on the front end is because, again, it's going to go to legal and finance. And so I try to be as particular with getting information from you on the front end, so that when it goes to legal, they don't push it back to us and say, well, we need for this civic lead to give us X, Y, and Z. So if I'm asking you questions and I'm sending it back to you on the front end, it's because I'm trying to look at it through that discerning eye to anticipate some of the questions that may come from legal, that may come from finance, that may come from the city manager's office, because we don't want you to get your application 3 steps down the road and then it come back because there's some questions. So we try to do everything up front with you so that the rest of the process is smooth sailing. In terms of your budget, this is where you will list all your cash expenditures. So if you're going to spend, you don't have to do a breakdown and say, you know, we're going to spend $50 for the balloons and $30 for this. You can clump those things together, because as you can see, we don't give you an infinite number of rows to work from, but we do want to do a breakdown of your expenditures. And so maybe you put all of your, if you're doing like planting, you may put all your flowers in one thing. You may put your lighting in another row. You may put your pavers in a second row, because those are 3 separate things. If you have questions about how to put your expenditures together to make it fit, we can work through that with you to put them in the appropriate categories. This is a good time to not fill this in by pen or pencil, but to actually use the form, because it will do the calculations for you. I have had times where people have put this in by pen and their math is a little fuzzy. And so if your math is a little fuzzy, then we have to send it back to you when the calculations don't add up. So please take advantage of the fillable forms. Where it says the neighborhood grant request, that's where you let us know how much money you're asking for. If there's any cash from the neighborhood, maybe the Civic League is going to put $300 towards this effort, you would put this here. If there's going to be cash from other sources, maybe you partner with a business, and some businesses, well, you know what, you've been a great partner and we're going to give you $700 for this event. You would put this there, and then it would calculate everything for you for total project income. When you get down to your match, where it says cash from the neighborhood and other sources, that's going to be where that's going to be from these two sections here. So cash from neighborhood, cash from other sources, you're going to take that and you're going to put that total here. Okay. Proposed volunteer hours. As I said very early on, there is a calculation for volunteer hours. So for every hour of volunteer service a person puts in, that's calculated at $22.50 an hour. Think about how many volunteers you have, how many total hours of volunteer time they're going to give towards this project, and put that here. And so when you put that here, if they're going to be 50 hours, it's going to calculate it for you and put that amount to your right. If you get any donated goods or services, again, let's say you're working with a nursery and they're going to donate $300 worth of planting goods, then you can put that amount here and that will give you your total neighborhood match. Now, if you are getting any donated goods and services, you will want to identify that information here. So if someone's volunteering to donate their, let's say somebody's going to donate their church parking lot where normally they would charge people to use that space, you can put how much that contribution was. If somebody is, we've seen people have donated signs, people that are architects, they've donated materials. Nurseries may donate materials, maybe Lowe's donated something. You would put those donations and those services here, okay? Or if somebody donated, if an architect is going to come in and they're going to do some kind of signage for you, they can put down their what they would normally charge for their services here. Any questions about the financial part of the application? Because I know sometimes there's a little bit of a hang up on that. No, Jim?
If I could make another comment or give a compliment, Ingleside, when they do their grant requests for their Inglefest, they do a very good job, I think, in giving their budget. Like if they want to buy a popcorn machine, they will put in their budget, we want a popcorn machine for $199.65, which is exactly what we need to advance their, I think they and others will put attach a copy of the Amazon cost. That really helps advance their grant. We've had other occasions where people give us a ballpark figure. I worked with one neighborhood where they said, we want to build a shed, and they just put the generic $2,500 on there. And so when we requested a material sheet and we went through with them, the actual cost of their, shed was more like $5,000. So they could not have afforded to complete the shed had we not gone through with them, the actual material list. And so the more specific, the better for advancing your application.
Thank you, Jim. And you're right. And there are a couple of folks on the call, civic leagues that I worked with in the past. Sherry did a great job with her last application, in which she sent in an attachment that listed all of what they wanted to do. And so not everything will always fit on the application. And that supplemental information that she provided, which was a breakdown for how they wanted to spend their funds, was very helpful for us. And so to Jim's point, when you provide that additional information to us, that's very helpful. Another civic league that I just did an application for, they provided pictures because they were looking to do a landscaping project. They provided pictures of the actual plants that they planned on using for their particular grant. And so those details really help you in terms of having an application that is completely filled out and provides all the details necessary to advance it. So as we get to the end, this is the contact information. And so the person that is the one that's submitting the grant should put and the person that is able to answer the questions, because a lot of times there are questions about the grant. And so this needs to be someone that we can call or email that can help us clarify things that are included on the grant application. You can always list an alternative person. So maybe there's someone else. If I can't get through to the first person, I'm going to try the second person. So it's helpful to have an alternative contact. And again, this is someone that was involved in the application process and understands the details of the application and can answer those questions. As I said, we have to have the Civic League endorsement. And here's something else I want to share for those of you that are Civic League leaders. If an organization wants to do something in your neighborhood, it's really important that you sit down with that organization and understand what it is that they're trying to do, because you're signing off on this saying that you support that. And I will give you an example of something where that didn't quite play out right correctly in the past. We had an organization that wanted to do an event that was solely about their particular church. That's not a community-wide benefit. And so even though it got the Civic League's support, we could not support that, because that was not something that was going to benefit the community. It was really trying to find a way to do it for that particular organization. And so in that regards, we could not move forward with that grant. We were able to work through that with them and talk to them about how to submit it for a future application. But as a Civic League leader, make sure that you understand, if you are partnering with another organization and they want to do something in your community, that they've crossed all their T's and dotted their I's before you sign off saying that you support this particular initiative. And so that brings us to the end of the grant application. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I would love to hear questions that you all may have, and also for you, if you are a person on the call that's done an application in the past, if there's some things that you wanted to share. So let's take a look at the chat and see what questions are there. So Mr. Brenner asked about what maximum outside with social distancing. So it's the 6 feet apart, Mr. Brenner. And to give you an example of, and is Nikki on the call? Nikki, do you mind speaking about the event that Lake Whitehurst did, and they were able to socially distance?
Yes, I had to unmute myself. So yeah, so Lake Whitehurst West Civic League was asking about how they can, well, they were talking about having a socially distanced event in the summertime, and they were like, well, what we want to do is invite people to come bring their lawn chairs and separate socially distance and section off a corner of the neighborhood on the main road, which Lake Whitehurst West is fortunate to have very wide neighborhood roads. So they asked for right of way, if they could get just a corner of so it can be blocked off so people wouldn't have to park their cars there. And so they invited a local band that was popular at the time for doing their performances in their own parking lot, their driveway. I think it's called the Red Stapler Duo, and they came to Lake Whitehurst and they set up in the driveway, and they had a socially distanced block party right there in people's yards, and people, brought their own food and drink, and they sat down in their seats and enjoyed the socially distanced event. So that was one of the more impressive ways that people were actually able to enjoy being outside and using an innovative way to bring people together during COVID. So I would anticipate that we might have some more of that happening in the spring and in the summertime in different areas of the city. I think that, just speaking from a standpoint of talking to Lake Whitehurst, that I think that the city in general is all for neighborhoods doing things like that, as long as they just adhere to the guidelines and make sure that they're safe and socially distanced. I personally didn't see any pushback from anybody saying that this can't be done. So it's actually quite exciting that they came up with that idea.
It was. Thank you, Nikki. And I think that didn't we highlight that particular event after it took place?
We did. So
Yeah.
we have this awesome tab on our Civic League, on our neighborhood development page for neighborhood engagement, their neighborhood stories tab, and we try to highlight individuals and groups and organizations within our civic leagues and neighborhoods if they're doing great things. So they made it to our neighborhood stories page. So you know, I personally love to dig and find out information from folks. So if you have anything that you're doing in your neighborhood, send it to your neighborhood development specialist so that we can get it up, because what we really like to see is we like to showcase our neighborhoods and our residents. So we don't know what you're doing if you don't tell us. And then the best thing about it is you get to tell other people the cool stuff that you do. So that's just a little shout out to our page, because we have cool stuff up there. So Jim helps put that up there, and I always send him, you know, here's another story, Jim. Go ahead and stick it up there so people can see all the good things that people are doing.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I just want you to know Nikki does a great job of highlighting her neighborhoods, and we love to see that. We want to have new content up there as often as we can. And so we've got some members of our neighborhood team on here. Delk is on here. Please share things with him. Please share with Zamar. She would love to promote what's going on in your community, as with Denise. And so if you are doing some great things and you're taking advantage of the grant, we've got some current grant recipients. And so Ms. Doja, Sherry, we can't wait to see how things play out. It didn't have to be this big event. What if you do something small and quiet in your own way, but it betters your community? We still want to highlight that, because that still serves as an example to another neighborhood of what they could potentially do. So we can't wait to see what comes of their two grant applications. And Mr. Brenner, was there something that you wanted to verbalize?
Yes, ma'am. I did notice something was pretty cool. I read, hopefully I'm pronouncing the gentleman's name correctly. Mr. Herbst, is that right to pronounce your name?
Yes, that's very good.
Awesome. I see you're from, you lived in Chicago, Illinois for a while. And my grandmother actually had grown up there and lived there for most of her life, other than living in Norfolk, Virginia, after she met my grandfather that served in 3 wars. But I noticed when I went back at a later age she had went back home to take care of her parents. I noticed in Chicago, and I'm sure you can concur with me, they would do what they call block parties, where they would actually get a city permit from the city and actually do a block party for folks that, and obviously I know with the social distancing and stuff, that kind of reminded me of that late Whitehurst event. And pretty much it would bring folks together. Different people make different types of foods. It was a predominantly Hispanic community that I had went to, but pretty much they had shut down one whole street. And pretty much everybody, pretty much made different foods. I know it's kind of, I don't know if we're dealing with, different folks doing food. Then you have a volleyball net down the road, further down the street, and they would block off one section of that street, and that street would be kind of a block party. And we're not talking about drinking and doing some wide open stuff, but it was pretty much for families and residents to get together, join together all to, to have a great day of fun. And I noticed that a lot in Chicago, where a lot of that happens. And of course, it's got to go through the city permitting part. But it really felt great. And it's a memory in my head that stays for a very long time, how great and united folks were. And it could have been somebody that didn't even know that neighbor down the road, and suddenly they came out of the house and got to meet their other neighbors. So with the pandemic going on, I think this is something great that we're missing, is folks seeing each other. And obviously, if this is going to be in June or close to the fall area, I just wanted to put that input in from being in Chicago and seeing all the things that they do in their city, being a big city. And then I remember they did a lot of food pantries and different things, but I know we're doing that now, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brenner. I think we will eventually get to the place where we're able to kind of return to that. And so, like I shared earlier, please be creative with how you use the application. There, the examples that we provided where it was not an exhaustive list. And we definitely want you to take advantage of the funds. That's what they're here for, is to support neighbors building neighborhoods. So please access those funds. Don't feel like it's one and done. So Sherry, if you all are revving up and you've got something new that you want to try for that next round, go for it. Miss Doja, be bold, be big with it. Philip, Ingleside is a pro now at applying for block by block grants. And so I can't wait to see if you're here. I'm just going to assume that it means you've got something that you're thinking about doing. Mr. Skiles, I hope that we get an application from you as well. Miss Wilder, I've not had a chance to work with you, but would love to see you do that. And Stella, with everything that's going on in Broad Creek right now, I hope that you're thinking about doing something as well. Were there any questions? I know Jim has a poll that he would really like for you to complete. Did anyone have any questions or any comments that they wanted to make? Philip, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you for having this informative virtual workshop on the Block Grant Program. It has been around for a while, and it's still one of those undiscovered treasures, and it's not because the city not trying to, reach out to more communities to engage them in this wonderful opportunity, to do grassroots work to support their community. So Ingleside has been blessed and fortunate for many years to have been recipients of the grants, trying to find creative ways to fund various projects. So we definitely want to continue that engagement. So thank you so much. We will, I'm sure, I'm a member of the current Civic League board. So I know that our board and our leadership is in support of looking for a project to, apply for this upcoming fiscal year that will help us re-engage our neighbors once we come out of the pandemic, or while we're still, in the end phase of the pandemic. So thank you again, Ornesia.
Thank you, Philip. We appreciate that. So it would make us so very happy. It really would. I would be smiling from ear to ear if I got a bunch of applications in February. I would just really be excited about that. So please give some thought to how you might want to use a grant. Like I said, work with your neighborhood development specialist to come up with some ideas on some creative ways that you can do this. You can apply for it more than one time. You just can't apply for it, do the same thing over and over again, but you can definitely apply for it. And you can apply for a mini and a matching at the same time if you want to be bold and take on two initiatives at the same time. Ingleside has done that. So don't let them be the last Civic League to do so. Are there any other questions before I turn it over to Jim? Okay, Jim, I am going to give it back to you, sir.
Thanks, Anicia. We really appreciate it. I know there's always some, apprehension from new people filling out the form, and hopefully this removes any of that apprehension and anxiety. It really is not, it's, a little detailed in places, but it's not hard. It's just basic information. We do ask, if you don't mind, the poll is open. That's our evaluation. We used to do the paper forms. This is our virtual form of the evaluation form. If you don't mind filling that out before you leave, we'd appreciate it. That helps us with our measurements and also in guiding us in future courses. Otherwise, I believe we're done. If no one has any other questions, we thank you all for coming. And as Anicia said, please, the real reward of doing this evening is people submitting grants. So thank you very much.